Uber passengers of Reddit that have given 1 out of 5 stars on a ride. What happened to make it so bad? Story 1. The driver didn't want to wait in traffic, so he drove up onto the sidewalk. We all screamed at him to get back on the road as he continued to drive down the sidewalk while pedestrians ran out of the way. He told us it wasn't a sidewalk, it was an Uber lane. It was a miracle he didn't actually run over anyone. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. Uber driver was visibly drunk. Not like blackout drunk, but it was obvious he was having a hard time staying in his lane. He kept veering over the yellow line, then would jerk the wheel the other way, nearly running us off the road a few times. He also had an open can of Bud Light in his cup holder. I had him drop me off a few blocks from my actual destination because I didn't want to die that night. I rated him 1 star and reported him. Not sure if anything came of it. Story 3. When I got into the car, he immediately yelled in a stern voice, "State your account ID." I take Uber almost daily, and I know drivers like to ask for your name, but I was so taken aback by the aggressive yelling. As soon as I got into the car, I was met with the most awful smell I've experienced in my whole life. It was like something died in there. I had to hold my breath throughout the whole 20-minute ride. Then, he drove me to the wrong place 2 times. By the second time, I just decided to walk to my destination because I was so vexed by the smell. Before I got out, after sitting in the car in silence, he yelled, "Rate 5 stars." He wouldn't unlock the door until I agreed. Yup, 1 out of 5. Story 4. He refused to acknowledge my presence and kept asking my husband if he thought it was fine that he, the driver, wanted to take a second wife because he believed men should be happy. My husband was not about that at all, and said that if he wanted a second wife, she deserved a second husband, and the driver flipped out. He told us that men deserve more than women and that she should be fulfilled by taking care of his children. It was incredibly surreal, uncomfortable, and demeaning. So yeah, a big complaint was filed with Lyft. Edit. He specifically said he didn't believe in divorce and wanted multiple wives because it was normal within his religion. I'm also the person that ordered and paid for the ride, and he actually shushed me several times for chiming in. Story 5. Well, they just never came. I waited 20 minutes and the car drove around in circles nowhere near my location. I eventually just canceled, but when I did, my score dropped. I went from like a 5.0 to a 4.9 or something. So she must have rated me. Then it gave me the option to rate her, so I gave her 1 out of 5. I don't know if it was a glitch or what, but now I can never recover my perfect score. Story 6. I was taking an Uber home from the airport. The ride was perfect, and he even insisted on dropping my baggage to the front door. Awesome. He then asked if he could use the restroom really quick, and of course I said yes. He wasn't in there for more than 3 minutes, but when I went to wash my hands after, I found my bathroom destroyed. Crap was all over the toilet seat and just everywhere. I really wish he had just taken more than a minute and crapped like a normal human being, but the dude must have had a leaky butthole because there was crap on my walls too. Honestly, a 1-star review was the bare minimum, I think. Story 7. I was on a work trip in another city, riding into my first shift at around 5 a.m. We were having a casual conversation and he asked whether I had a boyfriend. I said yes. As we were pulling into the empty parking lot, no one else was there yet, and I was trying to figure out which of the buildings I was supposed to be in, he asked if I would go get a coffee with him instead. I said no, and I told him I thought the building was straight ahead, but he turned the other way and started circling the parking lot. He said something about no one else being there yet, so I should just get coffee with him, and I said no again and asked him to just stop and let me out. He let me out, but then pulled into a parking spot and lingered there until sometime after I found my way in. Story 8. Immediately when I got in the car, I was hit by an incensey smell that was so strong it gave me an instant headache. She spent the whole ride trying to get me to join her essential oil downline in a well-known oil MLM. I declined politely and then firmly, I thought. We got to my destination and my head was pounding. She stopped and locked the doors. She told me that she wasn't going to let me out until I gave her my email address. I kind of chuckled and unlocked my door, and she immediately locked it again. Then she pressed the child lock so that when I tried to open the door, it didn't budge. I was shocked and scared, and she repeated that I had to give her my email address and handed me a notepad and pen. I just made one up and dashed out of there, immediately reported her. A couple of weeks later, she somehow found me on Facebook and sent a friend request. Needless to say, I blocked her. Story 9. You know what? Uno reverse card. I used to drive for Uber. I once started a passenger because he wanted me to end the trip early, then drive him the rest of the way to save him money. Because, come on, bro. I once started a passenger because he booked a regular Uber for seatbelts despite having a group of 8 people because an Uber XL costs like $1 more. I once starred an old drunk lady because she would not stay in her seat and off my head. Yes, Ethel, my head is shaved, and it is sexy, but we're on the freeway, sit down. I once starred a dude who changed his destination 6 times in one trip and made me change it on his phone for him. I once starred a pair of freshman chicks who were mad that I wouldn't let them light a joint in my car. You're not that cute, Liz and Elizabeth. I once starred every single drunk person who got pizza grease, falafel bits, or fried chicken crumbs in my car. I have to clean that, you little craps. Story 10. She wouldn't shut up for 2 seconds and just droned on and on about her life and things that I really didn't care about, only to get angry when I stopped paying attention. Her car was a mess. The back seats were covered in trash. I could barely breathe. It was a pigsty. I had to shove a trash can worth of empty bottles and cans just to sit. She had a little baby in the car who screamed the whole way and wasn't even in a car seat. Nope, this kid was just in the front, buckled into the seat without any precautions. When I mentioned that I have dogs to feed, she called dogs flea-ridden idiots, and then went on and on about why her cats were better. Proceeded to brake check people multiple times and then got upset when I told her to stop because I had an upset stomach. Went on a huge tirade of why LGBTQ people are the Antichrist and will bring the end of society. When I mentioned I have a boyfriend, she just said the same things but louder. Picked apart everything I was wearing, calling me trashy and lazy for still being in pajamas. I legitimately had no clothes despite that. Demanded extra payment after the ride, despite me tipping her 10%. Negatively reviewed me and made my score drop to a 4.6. Yeah, 1 out of 5. I'm never riding with you again. I don't even know your name, and I'm glad I don't. I despised your car, your attitude, and your complete lack of care for your own child. Story 11. My 1-star ride was actually my first Uber ride. Was at a meeting out of town and decided to take an Uber a couple miles down the road to visit an exhibit during the lunch break. I was excited to see what Uber was all about, so I watched the app the whole time as my driver drove away from my location instead of towards it. He finally called me and asked where I was, which was weird because I could clearly see where he was in the app. I told him the building where the meeting was and he was familiar with it, so he hung up. He made it to my location shortly after and the ride to the exhibit was pretty uneventful, but after he dropped me off, I quickly found out the exhibit was closed on Mondays. No biggie, I'll just Uber back to the meeting. Not so easy, because the driver forgot to end the trip and I couldn't call a new Uber because it said I was already on one. I had the driver's number, so I called him to end the trip, but he didn't answer. I left a message and set out a call to Uber customer service to see if they could end the trip. Yeah, good luck trying to get a real person on the line there, so I ended up walking back to the meeting. Finally got a call back from the driver after I made it back, and he explained that he went to lunch after dropping me and left his phone in his car. He ended the ride but didn't report the issue, and I was charged $30 for a 2-mile ride because the meter was running while he ate lunch. I started the process of trying to get the ride fees back, but can't remember if it was ever resolved. Story 12. Being one of my first Uber rides, I mistakenly sat on the front instead of the back. While he was taking me home, I'm a female, he started talking to me and randomly threw in there that he could give me his phone number to make him my regular driver, and proceeded to say he was kidding and placed his hand on my leg. I was wearing shorts. I felt extremely uncomfortable and unsafe because he dropped me home. I immediately reported him to Uber and they actually called me to have a better sense of what happened. They never told me exactly what they did, but they did say they took appropriate actions. So, who knows? Story 13. 2 stories. First one, my mom and I were on our way back from my dentist appointment, and we ordered one. However, the place is like a maze, so it took him a long time to find us, but my mom was talking to him on the phone, so whatever. So he finds us and we get in. Normal ride, then we get to our house, and after 10 minutes, my mom got the canceled ride. What was normally a $10 ride was a $30, $40 ride. My mom got a refund and gave 1 star. Next one, for my birthday, we were going out and decided to get a ride. This old man picks us up. Normal ride up until we get to a turn that he should take, but he doesn't because the app tells him something different than my mom, and she doesn't say anything fast enough by the time. My mom casually mentions how it'll be a couple bucks over what it normally costs. The dude tried to argue, and then out of nowhere he starts yelling at my mom, who's kept a calm voice and literally wouldn't let us get out until we got there, and was just a general butt. Once again, 1 star. Story 14. I was running late for my flight. Driver didn't realize that he couldn't drop me off at the airport because he didn't have a special permit for that. Instead of telling me to find another Uber, he drove around the corner and just waits for me to do something until I let myself out. I was still charged the cancellation fee and I ended up having to call 3 Ubers. If my flight wasn't delayed by 10 minutes, I would have missed it. Story 15. My sister gave an Uber driver 1 out of 5. He did not understand a word of English and apparently couldn't read English either, as he disregarded nearly nearly every street sign, including no left, which she yelled at him for as he was about to make a left on a no left across a very busy intersection. He also attempted to back up when he missed a street. She yelled at him for that one too, given it was a busy street. She immediately rated him 1 out of 5. She contacted them and told him that the man should not be driving for them. He is very unsafe. They told her they would unpair her with him. Great, someone else will get killed, I'm sure. Story 16. I was riding with a bag of specialty groceries, and the driver asked what I had bought. I was happy to make idle chit-chat, so I answered truthfully. I was going to make a goat curry. Over the next 10 minutes, he monologued about how much he loved goat curry and how you just can't get a good one in this town. And he needed to marry a wife who made a good goat curry, and he'd never met a woman who even liked goat before. And my curry must be really good, and can he have my number? Can he have my number? He needed my number. I'd obviously make a good wife and give him lots of children and lots of good goat curry. Phone number? Yeah, I gave him a fake number and scrambled out of the back seat. Never have I felt more grateful that I was being dropped off at the subway station and not in front of my apartment. Story 17. One guy spent the entire ride telling me about Uber drivers that assault/murder their passengers. Another guy ran multiple red lights. Not, technically I got to the intersection when it was yellow, type red, but like, if there'd been 2 cars in front of him, neither would have made it through legally, type red. My rule of thumb is that if the driver somehow makes me feel like I legitimately might not survive, I give him/her 1 star. I mean, I say him/her, but I'm pretty sure it's only been dudes so far. Story 18. Last week, man. My car's in the shop, so I've been Ubering to work. I book the Uber to work and schedule a stop on the way, gas station. Guy shows up, doesn't speak much English, but I'm not feeling too chatty, so no problem. The ride is normal. He pulls into the gas station, I say thanks, be right back, and hop out. I buy some cigarettes and a coffee and head back outside. No more Uber. Right about this time, I realize I left my work clothes, work shoes, and a bunch of other stuff I desperately need in that car. Deep breaths. I check the app. It says I'm still halfway through the trip. Wait, now it's glitching out and shows the car where it picked me up. Wait, now it's saying the trip is over? Please rate your ride. But wait, it gets better. The app won't let me call the driver. I can only leave a voicemail. So now I'm calling my wife at her work to come pick me up, drive me home, and get my backup pile of work stuff. Around this time, the lovely Uber driver calls me back. He's a little peeved at me for leaving crap in his car. At least, I think he is. We can barely break through the language barrier enough to figure out how to get me my stuff back. He finally gets across the message that he's coming to my apartment now. He'll be there in 15 minutes. At this point, I'm already an hour late to work, but screw it. Let's just get this resolved. 1 frickin' hour later, he shows up, glares at me for troubling him so much, and physically backs into me before pulling away. I was behind the car when he reversed it to turn around. I stumbled a bit, whatever, it's fine. I kinda thought I was over this crap, and now I'm worked up again. Story 19. We were in Vegas and were heading to the zombie burlesque show, so we called an Uber. The dude was a bit off as he didn't really acknowledge us. I think he was messed up on something as he was super sweaty and his face kept twitching. He then covered everything from the neck down with a large towel, and I believe he was jerking it while speeding through the strip. The final part was him driving 50 miles per hour in the underground parking garage at the Planet Hollywood Casino and was weaving between pillars which we almost hit. We got out the second he had to stop due to cars being in front of him. Story 20. I use Uber/Lyft often. Here's some of the drivers I've had and what they did. 1. Decided to smoke a cigarette with all the windows rolled up. 2. Driving me to my job, Starbucks told me that they only hire illegals and I should really work for a company who works with veterans and supports the NRA. Like, insert random unheard of coffee company. My name is also of biblical origin, so he spent the entire 20 minutes of the ride telling me that I should quit my job and act biblically. 3. Using his girlfriend's account and car. He picked me up, and when I asked him why his girlfriend didn't pick me up, he told me that they shared her account. That set off red flags, but it was almost 4 a.m. and I didn't want to be late for work, so I just went along with it. Then, as I was waiting for my coworker to open up the store, he came back around and asked me if I had a boyfriend and if he could pick me up after work. Remember, he was driving his girlfriend's car. After I told him I wasn't interested, he angrily revved his engine and peeled off. 4. Was picked up by this lady who gave me a business card with her number on it and said I should use her personal driving service. Wouldn't let me out until I confirmed that I put her number in my phone and would use her for any rides. Didn't rate her, but then I got her a week later on the same rideshare service, and the first thing she asked was why I didn't personally call her for any rides. And 5. One had music blaring and strobe lights synced to the music in his car and was dancing and singing along while having no hands on the wheel, was speeding and swerving in and out of traffic and looking back at me every other minute to make sure I was having fun. I was not, and asked to be dropped off a few blocks away from my house so I could just walk the rest of the way home. Reported him to Uber, and they said from the drop-off time it didn't seem that he was speeding, but assured me that they wouldn't match me with him again. A month later, and guess who I was matched with again? Story 21. Backed over a kid in a stroller and then left the scene. I got picked up at the front of a hotel. The people in the car in front of the Uber were unloading their luggage, and the Uber driver decided to back up. He didn't see the family with the stroller behind us and slowly backed over the stroller. It was one of those cheap travel folding strollers, so it just kind of crumpled up. Fortunately, the kid barrel rolled out of the stroller before it went under the wheel. The driver just rolled down his window and asked the mom if the kid was okay, to which she replied, "I think so." Then he drove off. I reported him to Uber and called the police to tell them I was a witness, but the mom must never have called because an officer never called me back. Story 22. I've had to give 1 out of 5 stars on a few occasions, but one of the most pertinent would be when the driver decided to drop me off on the other side of a busy highway across from my house, after refusing to pull into the driveway. When I started insisting that he pull into the driveway, he started screaming at me in Arabic. I'm legally blind, and this was at night. I also happen to have total night blindness, so getting across the street to my house was a nightmare. When I reported this to Uber, they said I had no basis on which to complain, but agreed to issue me a refund since it was my first time filing a complaint. Other reasons have included a filthy car that smelled like liquid crap that was left in the sun for a month, the driver relying on me for directions, and my personal favorite, the driver had a personal conversation in Spanish the whole time and referred to me as an idiot, among other things. I happen to speak nearly fluent Spanish and simply said, "I understood you the whole time," as I got out of the car. Story 23. It was a pickup at the airport. He didn't pull up to the curb, he just threw on his flashers and sat in the middle of 3 lanes, so I had to frogger into traffic to get to his car. He didn't bother popping the trunk even after seeing I had a suitcase. After I got into his car, throwing my bags into the backseat and buckling in, I noticed his windshield was smashed in. If I noticed it earlier, I wouldn't have gotten in. His car was dirty and his driving was erratic. What pushed it over the edge is a pet peeve of mine with Uber/Lyft drivers. He used the Uber app for navigation rather than Waze or Google Maps, so we drove straight into a known construction zone and we sat for 20 minutes instead of avoiding traffic. Story 24. Me and a friend took an Uber I ordered. We got in and the address already entered into the app, and just had a basic greeting and she verified the address. During the ride, my friend and I talked to each other, and not to the driver, but she didn't address us at all. When we arrived, I thanked her and got out first. As my friend was getting out, he watched her give me 3 stars. He told me once she was pulling away, and I immediately gave her 1 star. I don't know what more I must go through as a passenger than common greetings/thanks and pay to get a 5-star rating. Story 25. Had to get an Uber to the hospital at midnight because my then partner had woken up in excruciating pain. I watched on the app as the little car went round in circles and kept stopping, turning around, etc. He turned up about 30 minutes late. At this point, I was already considerably annoyed, but keeping a lid on it to support my partner. When he turns up, we rush to jump in, and I explain the situation and the need for some haste. He says, "Okay," then pulls out a frickin' map. I point out to him that he literally has GPS directions on his phone right next to him, but he just insists that GPS can't be trusted and it would be easier the old-fashioned way. At this point, I was fuming. I insisted that he put the map away and listen to me as I gave him directions from the GPS on my phone the entire way. To Uber's credit, they gave me a full refund and credit for a free ride after I explained what had happened. Story 27. I was tipsy enough to not be totally coherent, so visibly drunk, but still with it. I called an Uber and the dude was flirting the entire time. At the first red light, he suggested I come to the front seat. The second red light entailed a question about my intimate life. Then the third red light was a less than subtle request for a blowy. I had him stop the car 2 blocks from my house, then walked up to a random person's house and hid on the porch until he left. This was before the Uber safety feature, and goddamn did I feel unsafe. I gave him 1 star and reported him. Story 28. He went to put gas into the car without turning it off. Twice. Yes, twice. He pulled up to a pump and jumped out of the car with it still running. I reached over, was sitting in the front because I get motion sickness, and turned the car off. The car wasn't working, so he got back in, started the car, moved to the next pump, and jumped out again to the pump with the car still running. I advised him this time to turn the car off. I didn't feel like getting blown up in a fiery explosion that day. Then, on the way to the airport, he nearly sideswiped someone, made unsafe lane changes, and got honked at twice. If I wasn't running behind for my flight, I would have gotten out of the car at the damn gas station. I reported him to Lyft.